The NBA playoffs have always been eventful, but clearly not this eventful. The action has been nothing but exhilarating and impressive, bonkers even with guys like Luka Doncic, Donovan Mitchell, Jamal Murray, and LeBron James, just to name a few, playing out of their minds. But just when the intensity was picking up even more, then came the boycott. It was a stern and bold statement from the players, showing a united front to protest the continued racial injustices. It sent a strong message: this is bigger than basketball. But just when many already expected a premature end to what has been a thrilling postseason, the teams voted to resume action, giving fans and stakeholders a huge sigh of relief. Still, there is the pervading sentiment and perhaps the anger of the players simmering under the surface, and it could boil over again any time. How will this affect the NBA playoffs moving forward? That's the headline on tonight's Sports Page.
The hottest headlines.
The integral issue.
Who will join the pantheon of the great?
What's the outlook of the future of sports?
The game changers.
The history makers.
The stories that make sports eternally compelling.
Open the Sports Page.
So many things happening in our favorite league, the NBA, and it is just about time for us to discuss it, the issues involved. So many things happening at the same time. Charlie Kuna is with us, and we have two very important guests with us here today.
That's right, Seth. We actually have 200% worth of guests today because we have the two 100%, Mr. 100% winners in the PBA history. We have six-time PBA champion Sean Chambers, as well as Meralco Bolts coach Norman Black. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this day's edition of Sports Page. And we're going to dive right into the discussion right now. You know, there were supposed to be some NBA games, playoff games, just a few days ago. The Milwaukee Bucks refused to come out to play, and so the other teams followed suit. I'd like to hear each of your reactions to that. I think we'll start with Coach Norman.
I was a little bit surprised that they did not play. I knew there was going to be some reaction from the players within their bubble because, you know, a lot of them actually talked about the fact that they would rather be out getting people out to vote and being part of the problem with the racism in the United States than to be playing basketball, but they decided to play basketball. So I was a little bit shocked that they didn't play the game. I think they were trying to get a message across. They have a voice and they want that voice heard. So I was really happy that all of the players followed suit and they supported one another. But I'm also happy that they will continue to play in the upcoming games because it gives them a chance to really be heard. I mean, once they shut off and boycott, then they go back to their own towns. They're not going to be heard very much anymore. But because they're still playing, their message will still be able to be heard.
How about you, Sean?
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback about what Norman said. Is by them staying in the bubble and finishing out the playoffs, it continues to give them a platform to voice the racism and the discrimination that does happen in America. And by them playing, they're constantly able to get that message across to the American people and to people across the world. But if you're not finishing out the playoffs and you don't have that platform, it's going to kind of fizzle out. It's going to kind of go away if they don't continue to finish out the season.
But there have been some comments on social media, Sir Seb, there have been some comments on social media saying that by boycotting even that one game that they missed, it goes against their job as professionals, against their contracts as professionals. I mean, what can you say to a statement like that, Coach Norman?
Well, you can't really walk in my shoes until you try them on. You can always stand on the outside and make comments, but racism has been a big problem in the United States since I was a kid during the civil rights movement. And if you're not living through that, then you have no idea what other people are going through. So your comments, you're entitled to your opinion, but we won't listen to that. I mean, this is a time that the players have a voice, and all we're asking is that we be treated equally. And when you come right down to it, this is about the police more than anything else, how the policemen treat Black men in the United States. This is what this is about. And that's what we would like to see change. We'd like to see the attitude of the policemen change in the United States towards Black men.
Okay, Sean, do you think the reaction of the players it was not a planned thing by the Milwaukee Bucks. It's just sort of ripple effect that happened. Was it in anger? Was it in frustration because of what happened recently as well?
I believe it was more out of frustration and for the fact that they are in a situation where they're not really like our common everyday Black men or African American men in the United States, right? They do have privilege. They do have a lot of wealth, financial wealth that they have that the average guy does not have. So they put themselves in a situation where they can actually be the voice for those who don't have a voice by taking a step away from the game. And so I believe they did the right thing for one game because we're all talking about it across the world. But if they do not continue to keep playing, it's just going to disappear. So I commend them, but I do think they also do need to get back to work and finish out the season and continue to preach, fight against racism in America.
What can the league do? I know there's been a statement that was brought out, Coach Norman, of concrete things that will be done in the days ahead. As the season continues in the NBA, what more can the league do, in your opinion, to address the issues that have been raised or that are continuing to rage in America?
Well, that's a big question mark because remember, the NBA is a league, but the NBA is a league that has different owners. They have 30 different owners who are billionaires, who are very rich people, who have a lot of, I would say, they have a lot of power in their community because of their businesses and the people that they deal with. Now, how do those owners feel about this? That's the big question mark. We don't really know that. We know they have a basketball team and they have a predominantly Black league that goes out and entertains people, but we don't know how they feel about racism. We don't know how they feel about what's happening now around the United States. It would be up to the players to talk to their owners, to get their owners to support them, maybe to get people out to vote if that's what they believe in, or maybe to fight racism a little bit more in their communities. It comes down to the owners. I think the players are trying to put a little bit of pressure on the owners who have that power in the United States because they have the money. And if they can go out and help the players, I think that's what they're looking for.
Well, I'd like to ask Sean, you think this would have happened, this whole boycott thing, if they were not in a bubble, if all these teams were not in one place? You know, perhaps they had been talking about it as the days had gone on, because they probably wouldn't have had that opportunity if they were all back home in their home states or traveling from city to city. You think the effect of the bubble showed itself leading to that boycott?
I don't know if it's the bubble per se, but I think it's a matter of everything that's just been happening, building up across the United States after the George Floyd situation. So I think we go back to what Norman said. It's more about the police and what needs to change. And the thing about that is, for in America, maybe about 40 or 50, 60 years ago, most of our law enforcement, most of our politicians, most of our judges, and let's say predominantly of our district attorneys, the people that do enforce the law, have been white America. And just recently, Black people have been able to get into that field to try to make it feel somewhat fair when it comes to law enforcement and justice. So what Norman was saying about the owners, and I think what the players are trying to do in order to get changes, you have these owners that are billionaires and they have so much money, so much influence in the city of alone. The money that the teams, the arenas, the teams bring into the city, like a city of Sacramento, is astronomical. So if you can get those owners to talk to the police chiefs, and the police chiefs talks to their sergeants and the other officers and tell them, we have to be more about safety instead of actually enforcing our will, our power over a certain group of people. And the way you do that, if the owners were to put that pressure on the city governor, the city officials, and say, if we don't see a change in my city, we can take our team and we can move it somewhere else. And the amount of financial hit you would put on a city would be, sometimes they don't recover. You look what's happening in Oakland, California right now. So the Raiders are coming to Las Vegas. The Golden State Warriors are now in San Francisco. Oakland, California is going to take a major hit because of those professional teams are no longer there.
Okay, we're going to keep Sean Chambers a little more awake. He's in Las Vegas as of now, but it's always great to see Sean Chambers. We'll have more of Coach Norman Black and Sean Chambers, of course, when your sports page returns.
We all tired of just seeing the same thing over and over again, and everybody just expect us to be okay just because we get paid great money. You know, we're human. We have real feelings, and I'm glad that we got the chance to get in a room together to talk with one another and not just cross paths and say, good luck in your game today. Continue to raise awareness. We don't want to just keep playing and forget about what's going on in the outside world, because it's affecting us. It's affecting everybody. And we're more than just basketball players. We're people, and you know, we have these raw emotions and feelings.
A few years from now, there will surely be a sports documentary dedicated solely to August 26, 2020. It's one of those watershed "where were you" moments, the day when American sports suddenly stopped. Just moments after the NBA boycott, other leagues and athletes followed suit in an act of solidarity against racial and social injustices. The WNBA quickly postponed its games, with players of the Atlanta Dream and Washington Mystics wearing t-shirts with bullet holes in the back to symbolize the 7 shots fired by the police on Jacob Blake. When the MLB resumed play for the first time, the New York Mets and the Miami Marlins jointly walked off the field after a moment of silence and refused to play. Players in the MLS also declined to take the pitch as a sign of protest, leading to the postponement of 5 matches. NHL players also asked to hold off the playoffs for 2 days to lend their support to the growing movement. 2-time Grand Slam champion Naomi Osaka withdrew from a tournament, announcing on Twitter, "Before I am an athlete, I am a black woman." Clearly, they are making themselves heard.
Each got to take responsibility at just, respecting each other, treating each other equally. And I think that'll, make us advance in society.
We have a decision to make because we have uniforms on and we have these very powerful platforms about how to use them to make change.
There's so many negative people out there that just don't understand that we're not trying to make this about me. I'm not trying to make this about myself. We just want to be equal.
Well, gentlemen, we've heard sentiments from a lot of sectors here, but then there's a sector that says you shouldn't mix politics with sports. What can you say about that, Coach Norman Black?
Well, I don't really understand where the politics is here. I think what's happening with me is the fact that the players are just standing up for a cause. And this is more, like I said earlier, and I hate to keep harping on it, this is more about the police and the fact that they treat black men differently. I can give you an example. Obviously, cell phones have changed everything in our world because people are now filming everything when they see it. These things have been happening for years and decades, but they just weren't being filmed. So it's always the police versus the person who's being accused. But at the same time, look, we have to face the fact that black men are treated differently by police than white men. And that doesn't mean all situations, okay? All white men are not the same, but it just happens to be some bad apples to do this. And I'll give you an example. We just saw what just happened with the last couple episodes with George Floyd and then a young man in Wisconsin who was just shot in the back 7 times the other day. Then you look at the fact that the 17-year-old runs down the street with an automatic weapon in his hand and runs right past 3 police cars, is not arrested, is able to go all the way home 15 miles away, cross the border into Illinois, and get arrested the next day. Now, if that had been a black man running down the street with an automatic weapon, I don't think he would have got 20 feet without being shot. And that's our point. These are the type of things that have to change. People may think there's nothing wrong with it, and they may always say, well, that guy must have been doing something wrong. That's why he was in that situation. But still, police have to have a heart, and they have to be humane. They have to treat people, and they have to try to diffuse situations and not elevate them to a higher level.
Okay. Sean, you've stayed in the Philippines a good number of years. If you were to explain to Filipinos who are here, what is the issue really? Filipinos don't seem to understand what it is. If you were to explain it to a Filipino, how would you explain the concerns that are currently happening in the United States about race?
That's a good question. I was explaining this to a good friend of mine, Claudia, just recently. So the differences in the Philippines is you still have law enforcement that have power. You have politicians that have power. You have judges and lawyers and people of very wealthy Filipinos that have power, that pretty much have somewhat control of the country, right? And they can enforce their power. Some good bad apples, some people that are good, some of them are bad apples. But the difference is they're all Filipino. So you don't see the racial issue more than a social economical issue. And who has the money and who doesn't in the Philippines, and who has the power of being in law enforcement, who are the military guys, who are the guys that really have somewhat of a power over another group of people. Now in the United States, since my mother was a child, my mother's 78 years old right now. Since my mother was a child, my mother was forced to go to a segregated school because she grew up in Louisiana in the 40s and 50s. So she went to an all-black school. Everybody that was law enforcement in Louisiana and in the South were all white men. All the district attorneys were all white men. All the people that owned the land, the schools, the businesses, the banks, they were all white people. So the difference is that you're not being judged by the color of your skin in the Philippines, but in the United States, those who have power, those who have money, those who have control have always been white people, and black people are just trying to survive. So now you can impose your will on us because you have all the power, and it's very simple to see white and black in the United States.
Thank you, Sean. Coach Norman, I'll go back to you, then Charlie will ask the next question before we go into a break. Coach Norman, what can you do from here as a resident of our country, and you understand the issues that are involved in the United States? What do you think you can do as a coach here and as a member of the basketball and sports community of our country?
Well, the one thing I've done, because let's face it, as a coach, you do have some authority, is I try to treat people the way I want to be treated. I don't look down on people. I don't treat them like they're lesser than me, even though I might have a little bit of status. I treat them like I want to be treated. And that's all that people are asking for in the United States. That's all black people are asking for in the United States. And I can only do that in my own little world. Because I'll be honest with you, Seb, if I'm in the United States and I rent a car and I'm on the highway, I'm worried about being racially profiled while I'm driving. That's still a concern for me. Just because I'm a pretty good basketball coach and I was a decent basketball player doesn't mean that when I go back to the United States, I'm anybody. I'm nobody. I'm just like a regular black man. So I'm always worried about those situations. So I can only control what's around me, the people that I'm with. I can try to hopefully be an example for them on how to treat others. But when I go home, I still feel the same way every black man feels in the United States, especially when you're being confronted by a policeman. And let me once say again, all policemen are not the same. Right. There are some good policemen out there.
Okay, yeah, I guess so.
There are a few rotten apples too.
Yeah. And this is exactly what Isaiah Thomas said also, Charlie, that after you get out of the Coliseum, you're thrown into the context of the issues that Sean and Coach Norman have been talking about.
That's right. It's really difficult, I would suppose. I mean, that's something that we can actually relate to directly, but that's a situation there. Sean, I'd like to ask, 80% of the league, they say, is African-American, but there's that 20% composed of Hispanics, Asians, and the Europeans. Does that 20% have to get fully behind this movement for it to work?
Yes. I think you have to stand behind your brothers, right? You are brothers. You go to brothers in battles on the court. You must stand behind your brothers when it comes to issues that they feel so hardly about. You must stand behind your brothers, or you're going to create a division among one another. And I'll go back real fast again what Norman said. I feel 100% safer in the Philippines than I do in certain parts of the United States of America. Because in Manila, I have somewhat of a status there. People know me. The people that are in power know me. And so I have somewhat of a protection in the Philippines more than I do in certain parts in the United States of America.
This is a great discussion so far on these matters, and it's nice to educate, especially the Filipinos who are on top of this NBA situation. So the question now comes, where does the NBA playoffs go from here? And that's the question we're going to try to answer on the next part of this sports page. We come back after this break.
All you do is keep hearing about fear. It's amazing why we keep loving this country and this country does not love us back. And it's really so sad. Like, I should just be a coach. And it's so often reminded of my color.
Quite frankly, it's just in our community. And us, I know people get tired of hearing me say it, but we are scared as Black people in America. Black men, Black women, Black kids, we are terrified.
Welcome back to Sports Page. For tonight's That's What They Said, we asked a simple question. Do you agree with the NBA boycott? Ivan Capua says, as NBA players, no, but as human beings, I'd say yes. It's their obligation to their country to voice out what's not good for most. Not so easy to choose between being an NBA player and an African-American citizen. Gary Reforiel naman, sabi niya, protests and boycotts should make people uncomfortable. Then ask themselves why the players did it. Sports can wait. This is bigger than basketball. Edmond Reyes says, no, the league and the owners are the ones suffering. These professional players are being paid to play ball. If they want to protest, they can do it after the game. Basketball has nothing to do with it. And Popoy Fernandez says, yes, it's been an ongoing issue. There are artists, musicians, etc., different folks, different strokes on how they protest. Freedom it is. Respect their sentiments. And those are the things that the people said on our question for this episode. And so let's see what we can say about this. You know, there was mention of the guy they call the greatest, Michael Jordan, came into the picture during these negotiations just a couple of nights ago, and then the players came out deciding to resume the playoffs. Coach Norman, how much of an influence do you think Michael Jordan had on that decision?
He probably had a huge influence. I'm pretty sure that he was very passionate. I'm pretty sure he talked to the owners, and he's one person that can talk to them on their level because he has as much money as they have. But I'm sure he was able to sell to them, think about it. Our league is very successful. They're basically the one league that's been very successful with this bubble type program they have. And the majority of their players are all Black. So maybe we should listen to these guys and find out exactly how they feel. And let's take it from there. Let's see where we're going to go from there, what avenue we're going to take. But we should at least listen to them and support them. I thought that was a great move by Michael Jordan.
Well, you know, he's still giving out assists until now. We talk about another great player, LeBron James, because there's a lot of talk about LeBron James, about how he stormed out of the room in the initial meeting, and then he came back in and gave an emotional speech towards the end of this latest meeting that they had before they decided to resume. Sean, what do you think about LeBron James' influence on what transpired and how things will be moving forward? Because he did demand a lot of things from team owners and management.
Well, as a school official now, running a school in a tough neighborhood, I understand we should always take 24 hours before we get into heavy discussion or heavy battles, because we don't always come out with a level head. Sometimes we need to take some time to decompress before we go and have those kind of tough discussions. And I think that's what LeBron, in the moment, it was, you know, very heated, very emotional time, and there's a lot going on out there, you know, with social media and everything. So he came back, became a little bit more level-headed, and it was like, you know, okay, he's willing to listen to the rest of his the guys that he plays with, his comrades. And so he did the right thing to coming back in, and let's listen to everybody, what everybody has to say.
But I think we need to just ask shortly, Coach Norman, how do you think the players will be affected by this moving forward in the playoffs, the teams that are still there?
Well, I think some guys will want to be out there. And I think this is more about our current president polarizing the United States. And I'm sure they would like to be out there encouraging people to get out and vote in this upcoming elections. But I think once they hit the court, it's going to be competition. If you've been watching the games since they came back from the break, I mean, the games have been pretty much great, majority of the games, and the competition has been really, really good. The shooting percentages have been really high, and I really appreciate the fact that the players are really supporting one another. So I think once the competition starts again, it's going to be good basketball.
Well, we thank you two gentlemen for supporting us on this episode of Sports Page. Sean Chambers, 6-time PBA champion and Mr. 100%. And you have another Mr. 100%, Coach Norman Black, a champion coach, champion player, and one of the best imports that ever played in the Philippines. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Sports Page. And one last look, Mr. Seb Sarmenta.
The award has never been given again since these two guys have won that award. We in the Philippines and many Filipinos cannot claim that you fully understand, no matter how much you read, no matter how much you get into social media. You cannot fully understand. I take it from Coach Norman. You cannot understand the pain and the agony of such a life unless you experience it yourself. And the important thing is that we have two friends here who have lived and stayed here in our country, Sean Chambers and Norman Black, to help us understand the issue even as large as it is. The story will continue, and we'll keep track of it as it progresses. It's been a great show for all of us here today, a learning lesson for all of us. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time here on your Sports Page.